Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting week in my journey to a bachelor's degree in game programming at the University of Advancing Technology. I'm your host, Daniel Silva, and of course, this is DTS Programming. This week, I'll be presenting my Week 4 project for User Interface for the Win, and the title says it all. This week, we had to create some UI elements for the game, including health bar, life count, weapon display, health bar for enemy, main menu, quit menu, game over menu, win conditions, lose conditions, and some possible additional features such as ammo counters, waves of enemies, wave counters, or a minimap. Of course, this project also has to include all the previous requirements from the last 4 weeks, and those requirements will still be apparent as we go through this week's review. So taking a look at some of the elements that are readily apparent in my game, you can see I have a minimap here, which at this point doesn't do anything, and that just kind of acts as a placeholder. I have some animations that I added, but that's about all that does. Here I have a bullet count. You see it says 0 right now, until I pick up a weapon and start firing. My max life set to 5. You can see the 5 icons I have here for my life. Enemies have health bars. Player has health. Still ragdoll on death, still respawns. You can see that my life count went down. So now I'll set my max life count to 1, and then we'll go run a little kamikaze mission here. And although there's not much to it, after my last life, it jumps to this game over scene. And at this point, I can either go to my main menu, or I can quit the game, which won't do anything in Unity until I actually build the game. Or I can restart the game. So jump over and take a look at the main menu. Not much to it. I have some sliders for music and sound effects. Start and quit button. You can see my mixers do work. They are attached to my sliders. Sound effects isn't doing anything because there's no sound effects in this scene. I just have a simple audio item in my canvas, which I will work on adding an actual audio manager before the final product. But anyway, going from my start scene, I can start the game, and everything continues to work as normal. Of course, as you may have noticed, as I pick up the gun, we have a rifle symbol here. 500 bullet count for my rifle. Here's my handgun. You can see that the weapon icon has changed. The bullet count has changed. And I have the ammo drop reload set to 50 for the handgun, and I have the ammo drop reload set to 100 for the rifle. So talking about item drops, you can see that my enemies are dropping different items, mostly ammo. I also have health drops and a rare weapon drop. Here you can see an ammo drop, and my ammo is at 300, and now it's at 400. Some health. So taking a look behind the scenes of that system, you can see here I have an array set in my inspector where I can drop prefabs in. I currently have my ammo pickup, health pickup, and I have a rare weapon drop, which is this weapon here. My ammo pickup is set to the highest weight, then half the time I want health, and a 1% chance on my rifle. And I will go over this in more detail when I review the code, but I want to quickly take a look at the pause menu first. You can see everything is moving, player is shooting. If I hit the P button, brings up my pause menu. My player's not tracking the mouse, there's no firing going on, my pickups have stopped moving, my bullets are not destroying, my enemy is static. Of course, I brought in my sliders from the start menu. These have not been attached to any audio yet, but when I add gunshots and explosions, that audio will be on this sound effects slider. I'll also add in a game resolution slider and maybe something else. I'm still thinking about it. So I have this set up so that the P button will toggle it on and off, but I also have this resume button which will also toggle it. And so if you watch all of my UI elements, when I hit the pause button, I hide all those UI elements, and then when I resume or hit the pause button again, they all come back. And a quick restart to show that if my weapon display is not up and I pause the game, then it will still not be up if I have not equipped a weapon. So now let's dive into the code. This is the script from my game manager here. I have field for score value, which isn't set to anything yet. Store my player's prefab here. Here's where I declare my lives and my max life count, as well as my current player lives. In my wake, I'm creating an instance of this game manager. In start, I set my current lives equal to my max lives, and I have this set so that the designer can only mess with max lives and can't do anything with the current player lives. As you can see, I've hid this value in the inspector. I have a remove life function that just decreases the current life count by 1, and then I have an if statement that if the player lives is less than 1, then I call game over. In game over, I just take my scene manager and load my scene called game over. In Unity on my player's health, I have an on-death event, and that on-death event calls my game manager's remove life function. Also in my build settings, you can see that I have my scenes defined, my start menu, my main, and my game over. Moving on to the pause functionality, I have my onApplication pause here passing in my isPaused state. So this function just checks if pause is true, then set the time scale to 0, otherwise set the time scale to 1. And I have my pause menu as well. Here's where I store all my UI elements to toggle on pause or resume. This is the animator for opening and closing my pause menu. I have a scale speed set so designers can control how fast and slow the pause menu will open and close. These booleans tell the game if the UI is visible or if the game is paused. In awake, I'm just setting my menu close animator. In update, I'm checking for key down, key code P, and then I call my scale open the menu and pass in my scale speed. And after that, I call my toggle UI elements and pass in the is visible boolean. For my scale open menu, I first toggle my is paused boolean. So is paused equals not is paused. So if I pass in false, it becomes true. If I pass in true, it becomes false. That way I didn't have to write a bunch of different functions. This one function will self-toggle all elements. Here I set my menu open and close animation speed to the past and scale speed, and I multiply it by 5. That's hard-coded. This is just a value that felt appropriate as I was tweaking it. On this line, I'm just setting the boolean for my animator is paused. And you can see my isPause parameter here and my pause menu animator. For my entry, I just go to a static value that's saying pause is closed. From here, I check if pause is true, and then I open the pause menu with this animation. If pause is false, then I close the menu with this animation, and of course, true will open it again, and this will just become cyclic. I can show that in action as we go into the game. We're just sitting in this pause menu closed static value, and it transitions to pause menu open, pause menu close, and then back to open. Finally, I call my game manager instance on application pause and passed in the isPause value. So that's either going to be true or false based on this line here. And again, that will just toggle the time scale. For toggling my UI elements, I have a for each loop that goes through my UI elements array. And for each game object in that array, they will be set to the opposite of the state that's passed in. So if the game is paused, the set active state will be false. And if the game is not paused, the UI active state will be true. And I separated out my weapon display, of course, because it has its own toggle feature, depending on if my player has a weapon equipped or not. And so this is checking if a weapon is equipped. Toggle this feature just like the rest of the UI elements, but if a weapon isn't equipped, don't do anything. And then in this line, I'm just toggling my is visible state. So when this is called the next time, it will properly toggle all the UI elements. So just like this scale open and close, both of these functions are self-toggling. For my weapons display, I just have all my images stored, reference to my player, so that I can determine if he has a weapon equipped. I have this weapon display flourish, which is the little circle going around the weapon. In my update, I'm just rotating that image. For displaying my icons, I have an array of icons, and depending on which weapon my player is holding, if it's a rifle, then I set rifle to true and the handgun to false. If it's a handgun, I set handgun, true, rifle to false, and these are hard-coded right now. But you can see I have a to-do here that says refactor hard-coded values won't scale, so I plan to rework this whole section. Moving on to my weighted item drops. So here we have a custom serializable class. In this class I have a place to store my game objects for my items and a double for my chance to roll that item. I store a random value here. I have a double array called CDF array, which I'll discuss in a little bit. So for the select item function, we're passing in a weighted items array. We're setting our random to a new random value. Here we're going to populate our CDF array. So we'll drop down here and our CDF array equals new double array, and that's going to be set to the length of items that are passed in our weighted items array. And then I have a double chance total, which is initiated to 0. This for loop will iterate through the items in the weighted item drops array, and with each iteration it will set the CDF array index equal to the chance at the items index plus the chance total. So for the first one we passed in 1, so the CDF array at index 1 is going to be equal to 1 plus the chance total, which is initiated to 0. So the CDF array and the first value will be 1. So I found that by stepping through the debugger, it was easier to understand what was going on with the CDF array. So as we drop into this for loop, you see my chance total value is at 0. Now that it's gone through one iteration, chance total is set to 1. This is my weighted items array here with my chance values. My CDF array at index 0 is now set to 1. The next one should be 0.5. So there you see with the second iteration, my chance total now equals 1.5. Second index now also equals 1.5. And finally 0.1, which brings it to 1.6 total. And there you have it, 1, 1.5, and 1.6 for my CDF array. Then on this line, we're just going to select the index value. We're going to do a binary search of the CDF array, going between random.nextDouble and the last value of the CDF array. Here we're checking if that selected index is less than 0, and we can see that value is -1. In that case, we're going to do a bitwise shift, and that will return a positive value. And you see that value now is 0. To understand bitwise and bitwise shifting, I had to do a lot of Google searching. I still don't fully grasp it, but Google it and see what you come up with. It's just a way of shifting negative values and creating positive values by flipping the bits. It was too complex for me at this point. I'll study it when I have a little bit more time. And then of course we're going to return the item at that selected index, which is now set to 0, and so whatever item is in our 0 slot, which is of course our highest weighted item, and that will be our ammo. And so that code jumps back into the enemy script. It says instantiate whatever item was returned from this function at the transform position plus the item drop offset and the quaternion identity of the enemy, so wherever the enemy is at that point, plus the offset because the items were dropping into the ground, and so I had to raise them up a little bit. And so that essentially covers it for this week. You can see that all my new code is still well commented with my naming conventions, my object-oriented approach to programming. We're still working with encapsulation, polymorphism, inheritance. I have private variables where I need them. I have public variables when I need other scripts to see them. Game manager is controlling when the game is paused and the game over functionality. I've created a script called menu button, and this is just giving functionality to every menu button that you've seen in this presentation. Start, quit, restart, main menu, and resume buttons. And those are just either quitting the application or loading the proper scene. And for resume, I'm passing in values to toggle elements so that that acts as my pause button. So you can see my enemy just dropped the rare gun. I haven't set it up to be able to equip it yet, but this is going to be a bazooka type weapon, and it's going to have only 5 shells that are going to cause a lot of damage, and it'll have big explosion effects. As you can kind of see, the effects are already put in. Also, something weird is happening with my lighting when I actually transition from the start menu or the game over menu, so I'll have to get that figured out. But as you can see, all the old functionality is still there. My enemies are still using nav mesh to track to the player movement, cameras tracking, player health UI, damage, destroyed on death, enemies spawning over time, navigating to the player, equipping weapons, shooting at players, enemies ragdolling on death, destroyed after delay, health and life count, health bar, health percentage, weapon display, game pause, game menus at work, resume button, ragdoll on death, weighted item drops, using time scale based on boolean amounts passed in, all pickups are still functional, bullet count for additional feature, as well as a placeholder for a minimap with some animation flourish just to make it all look good. So that'll do it for my week 4 of Project 4 user interface for the win in my GPE340 course programming for game engines at the University of Advancing Technology.